Two of Gotham's elite are leaving a theater showing of The Mark of Zorro with their young son. They cut through an crime alley, and are mugged. A gun is pulled, pearls snatched, broken, spilling onto the cold, hard concrete of the dark alley. Then a shot. Young Bruce Wayne, indelibly traumatized, is suddenly all alone and afraid. The acrid smell of propellant lingering heavily in the night air as he falls to his knees. His parents collapsed and unmoving before him. This handgun became the instrument of his most defining moment, his raison d'etre, a moment that would take him to the dizzying heights of superheroics and the dark depths of psychological scarring. It's this traumatic experience that inspired Batman to swear off guns. "This is the weapon of my enemy," he once said. But does this, as many fans believe, mean that Batman will never use guns or that he will never kill? Just what is his rule? And why all the seeming contradictions? What brought up these questions recently are a couple things. First, the appearance of the Grim Knight, the dark multiverse version of Batman, who utilizes a massive arsenal of weaponry. The Grim Knight is a dark, corrupted version of the Dark Knight, hand-selected by the maniacal Batman who laughs for his affinity for killing, a proclivity for tossing rounds downrange to put baddies down. Ripped from Batman's greatest nightmare, the Grim Knight is the world's most dangerous vigilante, Scott Snyder said. It's uncharted territory, but does this mean that Batman has never used a gun before? Zack Snyder, director of films such as Batman v Superman and Justice League, did defend his use of Batman's killing with guns in his films. But does this mean that he truly never kills? Let's talk about it. Before we begin though, let me thank you for watching JLS Comics and pressing play. If you like videos like this, don't forget to hit the like button, share with your friends, and if you want, the subscribe button as well. I upload new comic book and superhero content weekly. Alright, with that out of the way, let's jump right into our Batman story. Denny O'Neil said, Bill Finger openly admitted that his main source of inspiration was the 1930s pulp character The Shadow, and later, as Jim Steranko once said, the Shadow didn't believe in the death penalty. The Shadow was the death penalty. Those blazing 45 automatics that he whipped out. So let's follow Jim and Denny's lead and begin at the turn of the last century, in a time between world wars when a growing threat overseas loomed like a grim shadow over daily life, a time of depression, violent gangland crime, and a New Deal. As is the case now, stories of the time reflected current events, and these stories were represented in pulp magazines. Pulp magazines were early, cheap 10-cent 20th century novels and stories. When the US entered World War II, the themes of these pulps changed from fantastical stories to grounded, gritty stories of the heroics and the horrors of war. Characters like Flash Gordon, Conan, Solomon Kane, Buck Rogers, the Green Llama, the Shadow, and the man whose film his family had just watched the night they were gunned down, Zorro, were all immensely popular at the time. It was the thematic change, along with the increased price of paper pulp due to wartime rationing, that caused pulp magazines to fade from popularity. Not even something like the strategy that Canadian whites employed could keep the medium viable. With pulps on the decline and comic books on the rise, this brings our focus to The Shadow. The co-creators of Batman, Bill Finger and Bob Kane, drew inspiration from the likes of Dick Tracy, Sherlock Holmes, Da Vinci's Ornithopter, the Bat Whispers, the Phantom, and Zorro as well. But it was the Shadow, just like O'Neil and Steranko said, always wielding his silver heat M1911s akimbo, from whom Bob and Bill drew the greatest amount of characterization. To further support this, Bill Finger admits that the very first Batman story, called The Case of the Chemical Syndicate, was a take on the Shadow story, Partners in Peril. At the beginning, Batman fought crime just like the Shadow, with 45s, and I don't mean vinyl. It was because of this mixture of pop culture characters that Batman just hadn't found his own identity yet. He wasn't the Batman that we know today. Bob Kane once said, about a year later, he was almost full figure, my mature Batman. Only then did Batman, as the story goes, grow out from their shadows to become a hero in his own right. But in those early days, Proto-Batman was savage. His Golden Age killing wasn't a result of a double tap, him punching holes in baddies with hollow points. He was punching them into acid vats, shooting vampires, judo throwing them from rooftops and cliff edges, crushing them with sacks of cars, and he snapped someone's neck with his boot like he did in Tech 30. Detective 35 is a splash page of him with a smoking handgun, but what did he shoot? It's not in the story. But Batman, even this proto version, this more Shadow than Batman version, never shot people directly. The Jack Burnley cover on 1943's Batman number 15 features Batman and Robin on a sandy dune, most likely Tunisia or Tripoli, given its print date of 1943, and they're firing a minigun. But again, context is important. It was a patriotic image. Right next to our heroes is a box telling readers to buy war bonds, and this is just for the cover. Another time, Batman bore down on a speeding vehicle with his minigun mounted on his Batwing. He's never depicted here shooting into the cabin, just look at the trajectory of the bullets. But the resulting crash, explosion, and hanging killed the crooks. The hanging looks appalling, but if you read the story, you'll learn it's not a mere man at that point. It was a monster created by Hugo Strange. The story was swiped from a Doc Savage story called The Monsters. See, context. But then we come to Batman number 4. Batman tells Robin, "We never kill with any weapons of any kind." Let's take a look at a pivotal page, one with an editor's note that says, "The Batman never carries or kills with a gun." Here too, context is crucial. In the previous panel, Batman finds a gun near a trash can that had been dropped by some henchman. In the very next panel, the panel with the editor's note that came to define Batman's rule, he's seen shooting a Tommy gun out of a henchman's hand. Let's look at the editor's note again. Batman never carries a gun. Batman never kills with a gun. It doesn't say Batman will never use a gun, nor that Batman will never kill. In the same panel as the rule, Batman is shooting. If he wasn't supposed to, surely the editor would have kicked it back to Kane's studio for Finger to fix. What it says is this: he won't carry a gun into combat, and he won't be like Joe Chill and kill with one. One story goes that it was Whitney Ellsworth that made the decree. "Take out the guns," is what Bob Kane said Ellsworth told him. He also said Ellsworth called Bill Finger out on it. "Never let Batman carry a gun," he yelled at Bill. To be safe, Finger added, "Remember, Robin, we never kill with any weapons of any kind." While fighting pirates, Batman, not Finger. Another, supported by Denny O'Neil, says it was a DC editor named Vince Sullivan who said that Batman should never carry firearms, making him more superhero than pulpy a la Superman and Wonder Woman. Sullivan, by the way, is the same editor that accepted Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster's Superman for a new title with the company. More probably, though, it was a combination of decrees from the top, folks like Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, along with pressure from advisors and concerned parents that prompted the change. In the 1940s, the McCarthyistic assault on comic books began with editorial hit pieces and book burnings that culminated in the 50s with Frederick Wortham and his famous hearings. This also happened to be a time of changing gun legislation in America. 1939, the same year that Batman debuted, was the year the National Firearms Act unanimously passed through the U.S. Supreme Court. "Comics are a menace. They're corrupting our children," cries that were echoed around the country. 1941 is when Ellsworth formally installed DC's own editorial advisory board to review comics and mitigate the blowback. One way, hey, let's not have our heroes kill people with guns. And it would be this way until the 1970s brought revisions to the Comics Code that allowed Denny O'Neil and Julius Schwartz to let the noir creep back in to darken the night. Batman's depiction with firearms continued into the Bronze Age, Copper, and the modern age of comics, but it's important to note that these cases are non-fatal, ambiguous, or just shy of a rule break. Detective Comics 444 had a cover where Batman shoots Talia in the back, but apparently it was a secret plot and the gun fired itself, not Batman. This panel is from one of the most notable, a 4-part story by Mike Barr and Todd McFarlane called Year 2, where Batman uses a gun, the same gun that gunned down his parents, in an attempt to kill the Reaper, but the Reaper ultimately falls to his death. It wasn't the gun, something the Batman stored away for 2 decades, by the way, that befell the murderer. Batman, also prior to a retcon, killed KG Beast, but he did it by locking him in a sewer to starve him to death, not by shooting him. Perhaps the most famous and often cited when this debate ensues is in The Killing Joke. It ends without definition, leading us to draw our own conclusions. The laughter ends and the lights die out, but I don't think Batman killed him. He couldn't. You see, Batman and the Joker are one's yin to the other's yang, forever in contentious alignment, forever doomed to be the other's counterbalance. They need each other to define themselves. With the other gone, they cease to be the thing that defines them. In Tom King's run on Batman, in a scene with Gotham Girl, Batman tells us that he is Batman because I'm Batman. It's who he is, so killing one means both die. He won't break his rule because if he kills the Joker, he becomes no better than the Joker, no better than the Joe Chill that ruthlessly gunned down Thomas and Martha Wayne. He becomes the very thing he swore to fight against, to protect others from. If Batman kills the Joker, another vile creature will crawl up through the seedy underbelly of Gotham and give rise to a new clown prince of crime. In Infinite Crisis, Batman has Lex Luthor at the wrong end of a pistol. Was Batman finally driven past his breaking point? Click. The gun was empty. Some say he didn't know, but he did. See, Batman's the ultimate prepper, the ultimate detective, the ultimate crime fighter. Wouldn't bring assets to bear on an enemy without knowing all about them first. A loaded gun weighs differently than an empty one. He knew. He wants his enemies to think he could lose it at any time. It's tactical psychology. It's fear. It's not rule breaking. In Final Crisis, in a showdown with Darkseid, Batman turns the tool of his foe on one of the greatest villains in DC Comics, Darkseid. But Batman doesn't kill. He aims for Darkseid's shoulder and strikes him with a Radion bullet. Again, no gun was used when Batman killed a gang of thugs in 2007's All-Star Batman and Robin #7. Nope. It was a Molotov cocktail. In Red Hood and the Outlaws #1, Batman scolds Robin for almost crossing a line from which there is no turning back. None of these times did he break his rule. He didn't carry a gun into combat, nor did he kill with a gun. But what about other media like film and video games and animated features? Tim Burton's Batman mounted 2 Browning .50 caliber machine guns on the Batmobile Batmobile and a pair of GE M134 miniguns on the Batwing. Burton's inspiration came from 1976 Golden Age history book about Finger and Kane, the pulp, more spirit than Batman version of Batman. Chris Nolan mounted heavy cannons and a missile launcher on the Batpad and the Tumbler. Batman the Animated Series found the Batmobile with a full-loaded missile rack. The Arkham Knight video games version of the Batmobile had cannons and Vulcan guns in its arsenal. Same with Zack Snyder. His Miller-esque tank had rocket launchers and machine guns mounted that he brought to bear on Superman. But these are mounted. He doesn't carry them, so one could say that it's not a rule breaker. Batman drops the Joker to his death and stuffs a bomb down a clown's pants, but again, Whitney Ellsworth never said Batman can't kill. Does he carry a gun? In Cartoon Network's Brave and the Bold animated series, the episode with Batmite gives Batman 2 handguns. He doesn't carry them into combat. Alright, the elephant in the room is Zack Snyder's version of Batman. A Batman at the dawn of the Justice League, whose roots come from a Miller Batman at the end of his career. Snyder's Batman is jaded, grizzled, and broken. His Robin murdered, and a Superman is upon the world that makes him feel powerless to stop the flow of evil into the world. In the warehouse scene, Batman uses another's M60 to shoot a flamethrower. In the nightmare scene, Batman uses a lot of weapons, G36 and what have you, but it's a dream. It didn't happen. Batman wields a modified FN Mark 13 grenade launcher in his showdown with the Man of Steel. But I'll say these things kind of prove that Zack Snyder doesn't understand Batman. All of these, though, are alternate versions of Batman, Elseworld stories, part of an extended universe and something somewhere else in the multiverse. They exist, yes, but they're not mainline Batman, the Batman of DC Comics canon. Just like I would say those early years of Batman were not yet Batman. So yes, Batman has killed, Batman uses guns, but Batman does not kill with guns. He wouldn't take a life in the same way that Joe Chill took his parents' lives. He won't become the very thing that drove him to be the Dark Knight. He uses his training and prowess and ingenuity to kill them instead. Batman's mission is of justice, and not of revenge, for revenge would unbalance the scales of justice and would add one more criminal to the world. Using a gun would bring to life the moment he lost his parents. It would blur the line he swore that he would never cross, and in doing so, he would become the very thing he has vowed to protect Gotham against. It's not a matter of practicality, it's the symbolism of what the gun represents to him. Batman has been brought to the edge of his sanity and his moral code. Batman seeks to instill fear in those who prey on the fearful, a psychological front in the war on crime. Batman's gun-wielding enemies are cowards, and cowards do not instill fear. Batman has wanted to kill. He's been tempted and teased and prodded to do it. He has always had a choice, and there's great power in choice. Batman's superpower isn't his money, like equipped to the Flash, or his detective skills. It isn't his training or his physical prowess. It is his unwavering resolve, his power of choice. He doesn't kill with guns. He certainly bends his rule right up to the edge of what it means, but he does not break it. Why? Based on Bruce Wayne's experience, killing with a gun is the easy way, the coward's way, and Batman is better than that. And that, my friends, is Batman and his guns. Did I miss something you feel is important? Agree? Disagree? Have questions or an idea for a future video? Let me know in the comments below or tweet me at comicsjls and I'll be sure to add it to the list. As always, thanks for watching, subscribing, and I will see you in the next video.